Hello, everyone. Good to get started, if we can. Good evening. My name is Tom McGrath. I'm the editor of Philadelphia Magazine, and on behalf of the magazine, I'd just like to welcome you to this great event. We're pleased that Senator Williams can be with us tonight. This is the fourth in our series of conversations with the mayoral candidates. Our goal here really is to give people a little bit more of an intimate glimpse of the candidates than getting a lot of the bigger forums, a chance to hear from them one-on-one, sort of how they look at the city, how they think about the world, what their positions are on various things. So before we get started, I just want to give a quick commercial for our new Politics and Urban Affairs vertical, which we're calling Citified. It's run by Patrick Kerkstra, who's behind me right here, as well as Holly Otterman, who's up here. Just great information on a day-to-day basis covering some of the most important issues in the city. So please check that out at our website, phillymac.com. I'd also like to say thank you to our host tonight, Pipeline Philly, and introduce Josh Dubin from Pipeline.
Appreciate that. Thank you. My name is Josh Dubin, as you just heard. I'm Director of Programs and Strategy here at Pipeline Philly. I'd like to welcome all of you here today. We're really, really delighted to be hosting events like this. Thank you to PhillyMag for partnering with us. We're really excited to be hosting these sorts of conversations. For those of you that have never been here before, Pipeline is a brand new co-working, shared office and event space here in Center City on 30 South 15th Street here in the Grand Building. We just opened last December, middle of last December. We're about 4 months old at this point. We offer workspace solutions for independent professionals, small businesses, freelancers, small teams, both of the for-profit and non-profit variety, and a variety of different space solutions ranging from open flex space all the way up to private offices and everything in between. We are, more importantly, a very flexible event space as well. And we can host events like this. Our goal here is to bring in conversations that focus on entrepreneurship, on innovation, and on civic engagement. And conversations like this that revolve around the future of our city, around getting our public and our citizenry educated and informed and engaged in the political process, that touches on everything that we're trying to do here. So we thank you for coming, for making this space active and engaging and exciting to be in. And thank you again to PhillyMag for bringing these sorts of conversations here into this space. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to Tom. Thanks for coming.
I forgot to mention that we do have one more candidate conversation coming up on April 27th with Abraham, so we want you to join us for that one as well. Please do your best to ignore the flashing lights. We had, I guess, a little bit of a fire alarm here.
Section is a disco. We had a disco right before. Couldn't get the lights off, but yes, small fire.
We're not trying to brainwash anybody. There's nothing nefarious going on here. Patrick will lead this conversation with Senator Williams, but we will also have a little bit of time for Q&A from the audience. We ask if you have a question for Senator Williams, just write it on one of the cards that's around here, and we'll collect them a little bit later on in the evening. So, with no further ado, please welcome Patrick Kerkstra and Senator Tom Williams.
Wasn't me.
You all mic'd up there? You good?
Okay.
Okay, great. All right, Senator, thanks so much for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. So when we were out in West Philly together the other week, I was struck sort of immediately by, we're just walking down 52nd Street, or just talking to merchants and other folks that walk past, and I was struck by how many of them embraced you and mentioned your father, your party right away. And I want to talk a little bit about him. For the folks in the audience who maybe don't know who he is, explain to us who he was sort of in the context of the city and what he meant to you in your political development.
Well, thank you. My dad's birthday was yesterday. And for those who don't know, my father passed away a few years ago from dementia and autism. So it's a little bit emotional and moving. For those of us who live in the city, you can't imagine a system, a picture of elected leadership. That's what Philadelphia was in the 60s. And it didn't matter whether you were black or white. The Democratic Party said, if you want to run for office, we will decide who it's going to be. And for whatever reason, my father decided to propose that. And he was a brand of a variety of folks. I guess a collage of liberals, white, and LGBT, and a variety of other folks took on the party. And it started with he ran for state representative. And he ran against it as a 10-year incumbent. who was highly supported by organized vote at the time. And they won. And they won with a variety of dramatically different than it is today. They cooked food, sold raffles. If they raised $5,000, that probably was a lot of money. But the significance of that was, and a lot of it is attributed to him about being the independent African American dean of politics in Philadelphia. The truth is, he was the dean. Because what happened was that the party had to pay respect to not only people in those neighborhoods, they had to give credence to people in the Fifth Ward, Center City, and some of those other more progressive wards across the city of Philadelphia. And they began to work together to organize their representation. We brought in a whole host of independently elected African Americans and, frankly, other folks like Beth Joseph and a variety of others that were part of that. As far as me, my dad's impact upon me really was personal more than political. I mean, he obviously helped me run for office. I'm a benefactor of that. But it was more about how he helped me grow as a young person with character. Those values that carry my public service today.
No doubt. You must have learned one or two things around the dinner table about politics.
Yeah, how to campaign. So, you know, how to be organized, prepared, how to run a field organization, how to analyze data, how to message, all those things sort of were part of it.
How about the governing side? Are there lessons that you learned from him, either as a parent or politician, that apply to running a city or building communities?
My dad got me elected, or helped me get elected in 1980, and he said, "Good luck." That's not what it means. He taught me the basic things to look out for, and so he taught me how to study, research, legislation, etc. But as far as getting around the building, I actually frankly a little better than he was. And I'll tell you, so he endorsed Tom Rich for governor. I do not. So he, of all the things, should have had the benefit of getting access to the governor's office. There was an issue. Rich got elected. I'm not sure what happened. They sort of fell out. And so those goodies that you would have thought would have come to him to access did not. There was an issue that arose in the General Assembly, which I adhered to. The governor needed a vote, and I had organized 12, and I was head of the Philadelphia delegation. I had organized several votes. And so the governor called me to the office, and we had a good old time powwowing about how I felt to treat my dad, and more importantly, what I could look forward to in the budget for my district. And my dad had an issue in the budget, and I was able to get that issue for my dad.
All right, so you're anticipating my next question here, which is the flip side of having such a politically consequential father, is that some of your rivals will intimate that you're born with a political silver spoon in your mouth, right? That you sort of inherited his seats and his political apparatus. You addressed that a little bit, it sounds like, already, but what do you say to those folks?
Well, there was no silver spoon on 5939 Cotton. I lived in a row house as a kid. My grandparents were both postal workers. My mom was a retired public school teacher. My dad was an attorney who believed in defending people who didn't pay him a lot of money. And so whatever the silver spoon was, the consequence was my father left me something, a legacy of responsibility. And I'm proud of that. And I think that, when people raise their children, if they don't have money, they can at least leave the quality of care. He did that. In terms of the politics, my first race, Bill Gray opposed it. And Bill Gray was at the zenith of his power. And so it wasn't a layup. It was a hard-fought contest. They endorsed somebody else. The party endorsed somebody else. I fought back, and I went door to door in places that my dad didn't expect me to go. So I'm proud of how hard I worked to get elected. In terms of the Senate situation, I think people allude to quite frequently. I don't talk about this publicly, but I will, since I've been asked a lot about it. My dad was sick. I didn't know how sick he was. He didn't know how sick he was. And my dad had asked me to run for the Senate, I think 4 years before. He kind of set me up, and then he let me down. He didn't retire. This time I wasn't any part of that. So literally, the week of filing, he had not done anything. I did not realize, his staff and the folks who were organizing didn't realize that he was forgetting things. And he literally said, I don't have it in me. And so I asked him, should I file petitions on my behalf? And I filed petitions on his behalf and my behalf, because he sort of left it unnoticed. There was another person who also filed petitions at the same exact day, because there's no secret about it. So 2 people filed. Myself and another person filed at the same period of time. The difference was that my petition survived any challenge because I did it the old-fashioned way. I got legitimate petitions. The other person did not. And so when people say, it was a little backdoor activity, the truth is, and I don't whine about it, but the truth is my dad was sick. I didn't know he was sick. That's why it took so long for it to evolve. But more importantly, the moment we all discovered we were going to follow, two people. One guy who wanted to have that seat. He waited 3 years to talk about having that seat. He filed. He didn't survive the contest.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the campaign. Your theme here is One Philadelphia. That's the phrase that you bring up at sort of every public event that I've seen you at. What does that mean? And please be specific.
So it's obviously aspirational and visionary, but it's also very specific in nature. So it reminds me of the city I grew up in, the neighborhoods. And sometimes neighborhoods divided by race, ethnicity, gender, income. Economy doesn't work. And clearly, schools. People are concerned about schools in Center City as they're concerned in other more challenging areas. There's not a one uniform approach to provide quality schools across the country. And frankly, we are dividing it into winners versus losers in that conversation. Economy, which has to integrate those who are reentering society, those who are high school dropouts, those who graduate from high school, college, PhDs, and entrepreneurs. There's an ability to do that, but we spend a lot of time dividing that. So Center City consequently has 44% of the growth. Neighborhoods are flat. And a public safety system that people sort of divided over like the nation is. Scared to death, holding their breath that something bad doesn't happen because we haven't figured out to reconcile the fact that everybody's a human being, cop or citizen. And how do we get to that place? So there's someone who is me running for mayor who believes that consensus is the time that we should work in. It's not easy to get consensus because your friends get annoyed with you agreeing with the person that they think is the enemy. But the truth is, compromise is what's going to drive Philadelphia hitting all those different areas. And so when you hear me say one Philadelphia, it's about recognizing that Northeast Philadelphia thinks that I'm a kid from West Philadelphia and I'm out here. The truth is they don't realize how many friends and family members I have up there. Northwest, South Philadelphia, all the same. Recognizing that we bond over those three areas and a right of others.
You and I kind of went back and forth about this a little bit before, right, the other day. And there's sort of a pendulum, I think, in City Hall with mayors, and a sense that some are focused on Center City and that some are focused on the neighborhoods and back and forth. You're saying that you're not talking about a pendulum swing.
No, and I don't think it works. I think that the next big city in America is going to be able to reconcile the fact. I mean, nothing's ever perfect, but if you work towards that end, I mean, the concept I talk about, small business, technology, energy help provide access to every one of those categories. Every one of those categories. The other night, I watched Black Girls Rock on television. There were 3 young African American women who graduated from high school, going on to college. They'd already started businesses. They were quite successful. And so they could have gone into life out of high school. App application. You know, App Up, which is a pen, is a entrepreneurial-driven activity that people that Penn started a few years ago. College students to give out a $50,000 grant to a college student who creates a business on an app. We started a high school component of it, and it's at West Philadelphia, Sayre, and Boys Latin. These are integrated relationships which have real consequences in real neighborhoods in real time. And we have the ability to do those 3 things to allow for an economy which goes across the expanse of Philadelphia. And I don't say that the mayor should plan it. I just think that the government should have an idea about it, outline it, and then allow the marketplace to drive.
So how does the mayor sort of like diffuse those tensions that you suggest prevent Philadelphia from being one Philadelphia?
It's how you look at each other. I mean, and the sad tragedy of what happened in South Carolina, where a police officer shot down another man. Those were 2 human beings in space and time. One human being shot the other human being. But one person didn't see that other person's human. Unfortunately, I read in the newspaper today where a gentleman on the narcotics squad confessed in his own comments that he didn't see criminals as human beings. So the way we sort of meander around Philadelphia in our own silos, and by the way, everyone has limitations. I'm not describing a valid person who has a hood on their head. I'm talking about most of us have limitations in how we see the dignity of each other. And I'm not talking about, I went to a Kerkstra school, but I'm not talking about kumbaya, I'm talking about practical considerations. 27% poverty in Philadelphia, housed right next to Rittenhouse Square, costs us a lot of money. So morally did I move? Economic issue. It's costing a lot of money. How we fix the schools drives people outside Philadelphia we can't afford to lose. So when I say one Philadelphia and I talk about that, the question is how we have a mayor who can get past the limitations of the fact that I'm an African American guy with gray hair who's like very thin and gorgeous looking. I don't think that is funny at all. But can inspire us to look past our limitations and say, oh, there's another element to that person. And that adds value to us. And all these little different areas that I talked about, once you flesh it out, we're going to get a lot more productivity out of it.
So is that a bully pulpit approach, or is it a programmatic one? I mean, you mentioned the other day, this notion, was it today? This notion that, there should be, well, you described it, for in terms of the police force, there should be a morality clause.
Yeah, character clause.
Character clause. Explain that.
So, it is a bully pulpit and policy, both. And so for those who don't know, I recently talked about how we solve this tension between the police department and those who live in communities. And one of the things I said was the president, along with their own commissioner, gave us an ability, I think it's a 91-point plan, 50% of it we can adopt municipally, but it allows for technology on police officers, technology in dangerous spots, a more diverse community, and training, a whole list of things. I added an addendum to that after I've seen far too many incidents like South Carolina that, and like the ones I saw in Philadelphia, that say that if you're a police officer and you are sexist, racist, homophobic, and it comes to the public that you are such, you get fired. And you don't get fired with the ability to come back to work. No arbitration. And I think the FOP should sign on to that. If we are going to be a good, well, understand something. If you have those limitations in your life, you want to paint a wall, so be it. You want to lay carpet, so be it. But you can't have a gun strapped to your side and have those feelings in your heart and not see people as human beings and then try to apply justice, because it just doesn't work. It ends in too many situations that maybe somebody's not shot, but something knocks, and it's not going to happen. Just as it happened in the narcotics squad when they're not seeing people as human beings. And so, yes, I've said quite publicly there should be a zero tolerance when it comes to these conditions. We expect that of our children in schools. So if a child goes to school and they carry a weapon or something that's described as a weapon, they're expelled. They expect us, we saw in the NFL, when some people sort of skated around the fact that they treated women, oh, just made a mistake. There's zero tolerance today for this kind of thing. And we can grow at that level. It's not about people, being relaxed, having a party, being drunk, and all. I mean, I don't buy all that nonsense. The bottom line is it's coming out of your mouth and you have to hold the counsel at that serious level.
Let's talk about education. For a long time, for most of your career, it's been.
Am I talking too fast? I am. Oh, thank you. Anytime I do talk, thank you.
This has been the issue that sort of animates you the most. I think it's fair to say. Why is that? I mean, why, of all sort of focuses out there, is it in education that most gets you out of bed in the morning?
Because my dad started in poverty, and he made it clear, as my mother did, early life, the way they got out of poverty was through education. And they didn't have everything. They didn't have everything at school, but they had an organized school. Teachers cared. My father could tell you who a second grade teacher was and how it changed his life. My father went to college, planning to be a gym teacher, and a professor interrupted his life and said, "You can go farther." My dad graduated from University and law school because of a teacher. So, education is a paramount stepping stone and equalizer in this nation. It always has been. It always will be. And the public process has to be held to account. It has to perform at a certain level to give opportunity to everyone. And so for me, out of all the things I've seen as a Democrat, the things that Democrats talk about the most and brag about the most is funding education. What we do about it to move it forward is the question. And so it drives me. I live in one of those rural houses. I live in the house I grew up in this street, so I see a wide range of demographics. Single moms, single dads, married couples struggling to find a good school in their community that supports their children because they don't have a lot of money. So it drives me understanding the backup of what happened to my dad.
So right, and I think that's true. That a good chunk of your focus on education has been not just about funding, but about changing the sort of system. And yet, in this campaign, I mean, some of the stuff that you've talked about before isn't getting much of an air. You rarely talked about vouchers at all in the mayoral campaign. And school choice has been sort of a central sort of feature for you of the way that you think schools should get better. So why not talk about vouchers? Why not embrace the school choice agenda more than you have, since it's been so central to your educational identity for years now?
Well, actually, I'm not sure. If you ask me a question, I'll answer the question. Reporters haven't asked me a question. And by the way, I've been in the legislature for 26 years. It hasn't been the only component or element. I've talked about vocational education being eliminated from schools. I've talked about funding formulas. I've talked about supporting Penn Alexander and the the lines which are drawn around these neighborhood schools and the attention because certain kids can't get in, the one that attracts the press the most is a Democrat, African American Democrat in particular, talking about vouchers. So I talk about vouchers about as much as Jim Kenney talked about vouchers. Okay? I talk about charter schools about as much as Jim Kenney talked about charter schools. He started too. I talk about choice about as much as Jim Kenney does about those issues. And by the way, I talk about EITC, Education Income Tax Credit, which you guys know a lot about, maybe you all don't know, about as much as Jim Kenney did, because last year when we was floating a letter for the same thing. So I just think it should be balanced.
Well, we did ask Jim Kenney about vouchers. That's
Yeah.
We were going through that story. So
I'm not saying you didn't. Wait. I'm not saying you didn't, but I also would say this. Because my dear friend Holly thought I was unclothed at an event recently, right? He came out and embraced the charter conversation. I embrace the good school conversation. And I really am about good schools. And so I really don't care whether it's the bad charter, shut it. But I don't know why traditional public schools get to pass at 50 years of not performing. We need to recognize Philadelphia public schools, before charters existed, were not working. There are about 1 million people, 100,000 plus students who left before charters existed, and they could afford to move. So why
so
would
it's part of the answer to that vouchers?
no, America's not going to be involved in vouchers. I think everybody who writes about this stuff knows. I'm not going to have a Holly, you listen to me? I'm not having a charter policy, okay? Mayors don't have charter policy. I mean,
Well,
they don't have
mayors don't
policy.
have fair funding formulas either. That's
Yes,
that's
they
the
do.
state matter too.
No. Locally, we have a responsibility. And by the way, the imbalance in terms of school funding in Philadelphia, 60+% coming from the state versus X coming from the local government, is in part because we have not been good fiscal stewards locally.
Absolutely. We're going to get to that in a second. But I don't want to move on from this issue just yet. So, I mean, there are state responsibilities in education. No doubt that the state runs the SRC. But you and the other candidates have no problem opining on certain elements of the state's responsibility. Why not talk about vouchers? I mean, it's something you've advocated for in the past. If you believe that that's a way to improve the school district of Philadelphia.
I didn't say improves the school district. What it does is give a scholarship to a child who may be in a school system that's not improving rapidly enough. Just the same way charters have 60,000 students and 30,000 student waiting lists. Parents aren't saying that they don't want public education. I never said I don't want schools to work. What I said is that the transfer slips, since I've been a state representative, on my list, on my desk, pile up. And parents want a way to find a better, safer school for their child. And so vouchers were a part of that conversation. But I'm not wedded to one method versus another method to make public schools better. I'm wedded to performance and outcomes. Provide the resources and then design a system that clearly works. And we have some best practices in Philadelphia that actually work in the public domain that I think we should replicate across Philadelphia. And I'm more than happy to talk about it. As much as you want to talk about vouchers, I'm more than happy to talk about schools that work.
This is my last question about vouchers. But would you, as mayor, ask friends in Harrisburg to would you push for voucher legislation in Harrisburg? You've got relationships there.
No, I don't have a reason to push for a voucher legislation in Harrisburg. I mean, I have a reason to make sure public schools work in Philadelphia. That's not, we want the majority. If you had vouchers, everybody who's ever been associated with them knows they don't they do not replace the system. There wouldn't be enough of them to have every child have one. So the question is, how do voucher is really more an emergency for the set of circumstances that are faced as opposed to an answer for the set of circumstances which are faced. And so for me, the question is, how do we bring the scale of public schools that work across the board? That's where I've been. That's where I've been since 1989. That's where I am today. And in between, there have been a bunch of stuff that has sort of evolved, and one or two items catches the interest because it's a sexier issue to attach to. It's like more controversial. Oh, look at what he's done, as opposed to look at the weight of what's going on in public schools. Public schools have, in Philadelphia, a significant dropout rate. Forget vouchers. Forget charters. Does that problem disappear? No, it doesn't. The funding issue. Forget charters, forget vouchers. Does that problem disappear? No, it doesn't. Do all schools in Philadelphia evenly work across the framework of Philadelphia? No. People are still moving into neighborhoods in Philadelphia based upon the school that's in that neighborhood.
Sure. So what you say about the school funding and sort of the local responsibility there is absolutely accurate. The city doesn't fund its district as much as other, even comparably impoverished cities do in other states. Your school funding plan calls for $200 million in new revenue a year. you have 100 million of that coming from the state, 50 million coming from the Philadelphia School Partnership, and only 50 million of that 200 coming from the city. And you're not asking for a tax hike on that. You're asking for that to come from basically efficiencies in city government. Is that a realistic plan? Mayor Nutter doesn't seem to think so. He's been bashing all the candidates' plans.
No, I don't. I was a realistic thing because all I said about mine was you would have to cut services.
Okay, which services would you cut?
I'm not cutting services. I have a different perspective that he thinks. Those efficiencies that we talk about that are real, that they know about. For instance, a paperless government. Paperless government and secondary categories of that, and efficiencies in employees interacting provides, I think it's like $7 million with the paperless government portion, another $40 million with efficiencies with employees, and then another category that relates to those who have to interact with MSB and City Hall. That money I talk about is real money, just as the contribution that I talk about is real money. So my money is based upon a real plan. It's just, and by the way, you know, I do recognize that the mayor has a different perspective than mine. His plan depends upon the governor's budget. His plan depends just like mine does. So in both cases, we're depending upon something that may be speculative at best, hopeful at most.
Well, that's true, but the mayor's plan does include $105 million in new taxes, and that's bank money if you get to council, which is a significant
okay, there we go. I mean, that's my point. I mean, having an idea that makes sense doesn't necessarily comport with the reality of a political season and the truth of getting it through council or the general assembly. And in both cases, we're challenged. And in both cases, you're going to see opposition to those conversations. And so for me, I have to craft something that I know works, that also politically can survive. My plan works and politically survives.
Superintendent Hyatt's asking for $105 million from the city. Your plan includes $50 million in new recurring city revenue, and the other 50
3 years.
Is 3 years. 3 years from PSP, $50 million each year.
And then the
governor's
plan.
Bankable.
Well, as bankable as the mayor's. I mean, the mayor says the governor's proposal has to pass, and then all things are even, because this is a 1 year plan. Mine is a 1 year plan. Well, actually, mine's 3 years, but it's as real as his. If the governor's plan passes, actually, we have more money as a result of it in my plan than his. So I think they're equally realistic, if you would, if that's the term you want to use.
Longer term, I mean, one would assume that the district fees will continue to increase, that there will continue to be demands on the city for increased school funding. How would you seek to meet those demands longer term? I mean, some of the things that have been batted around are tax hikes, but also asset sales. Are there other approaches to kind of meet? And I'm beating this drum because this is the central one of the central themes of your campaign at school. So,
well, actually, it's 3 parts. That's not my central theme, but you guys made it the central theme. So, well, I'll just accept it since I'm here tonight.
Schools isn't a central
Schools and economy and public safety. I said that very briefly. They're all equally important. If you don't have job and job growth, Philadelphia is 15 out of 15 big cities lagging behind. Our tax record is adequate and drives people outside of Philadelphia. The wage tax causes people to move from here and not return here. So they're all equally significant. All equally significant.
Okay, so in terms of longer term support for the schools, what might that look like from a Williams
administration? The superintendent has said that if they meet this initial challenge, actually it levels off and then the cost actually goes down. And so I'm taking him at his word. So what I've always talked about was fixing the pension process here, the pension problem we have in Philadelphia. We fix the pension problem in Philadelphia. 22% of the general fund goes towards public education. Goes towards paying the pension debt. That frees up the ability to have more money goes towards public schools. And by the way, the mayor actually is in charge of fixing potholes. So we guys can fix streets. We also can take care of schools. In addition to that, we also can clean streets. And we've identified a modest increase in terms of fees to do that.
I think your record's an interesting mix of conservative positions in some areas, liberal positions in other areas, or moderate positions in others. It's a somewhat different mix than I think is typical for like a Philadelphia Democrat. I wonder if you agree with that, and B, if you agree with that, why does your profile look like that? Why is it different than sort of across the board sort of liberal positions that you see from most Philadelphia Democrats?
So my conservation rating is 100% from conservation goes to Pennsylvania, 90% from the Sierra Club, 100% from now and other groups, 100% in terms of labor. The only hiccup that any people ever really charged me with is around education. And my record is 95% in terms of that. I'm not sure how much more progressive I can get. So I'm a Baptist, so some of those things may come out of that value system. But if people really read my record in this race, I am progressive. I'm not a guy who's evolved. I'm not a guy who's changing. I'm who I am. And I've always been that way.
Okay, so you don't, I mean, it's in public remarks before, you describe yourself as a pragmatic Democrat.
Right.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
I look at issues and I evaluate the goodwill and the value as it relates to my constituents. And if it works for them, it works for me. I listen to them. I mean, understand something. You made a lot of talk about vouchers, right? When you have, on average, 25 transfer slip requests on average a month, you have to do something about it. Or you can sit there and go along and say, well, I can't do it because the teachers union might get a little bit annoyed with it. You have to do something about it. I didn't get in the office to follow people or to get reseated to a seat. I didn't care about that. And by the way, I wasn't running for governor or mayor when I took these positions. I was running for re-election for the Senate or the House when I took these positions. And so I don't understand how I've become this this aberrant, other than I speak about it publicly. I don't hide it. But it goes to anybody who was a progressive that grew out of a liberal movement that was associated with my family. It was about empowering people. It's not about patronizing people or you telling them or dictating the terms. It's about empowerment. And fundamental to that is empowering somebody with a good education and a great job or creative business. That's what it's about. And by the way, it doesn't matter where you come from. What part of Philadelphia shouldn't matter. Where you start shouldn't matter. We should all have the ability to do that. And so for me, my passion is around the fact that I think people have hijacked this progressive conversation and put it in a different space than it really is. If you talk to people in neighborhoods,
Please elaborate on that. What do you mean by that?
you talk to people in neighborhoods, well, reentry. Who in this race has done anything about reentry other than me? I've done those programs for years. Got people who are high school dropouts, people with high school certificates. When the stadium was being built in Philadelphia, and some of my friends were build it, and the trades wanted it, and we're coming up to Harrisburg, and by the way, coming to city council. There was a program called DAP, Diversity Apprenticeship Program, that I worked at with then Tom Ridge and then Secretary Butler, that basically said, I don't care, about all these conversations about jobs, because they're not bleeding in my neighborhood. They're in Jersey and Delaware. I'm concerned about people living in my neighborhood. I didn't give up my vote without getting DAP funding. The governor gave $1 million that year to start that. And by the way, some of my friends, Dwight Evans included, supported it for years going forward. And so people have conversations. I didn't have a press conference about it. Most people don't even know about that. Don't know about that until I ran for mayor in Philadelphia. They don't know the consequences. We have graduates across Philadelphia that are women of color, Latinos, African American men, all part of that program to change the face of how we're doing business in some of the trades. It hasn't changed all of it. We have a long way to go, but it was a start. And so for me, as a person in this conversation, with a pragmatic moment, been out of a progressive, empowering perspective, drive it. And I can point to each one of these categories. My position on, zero tolerance. For some people, it's kind of shocking that we should be saying to people zero tolerance on ethnic slurs. I don't understand why that's so revolutionary, extraordinary. And I'm not sure why people actually think about it. I'm not sure why my dear friend Nesby would actually say, we would lose a decent amount of police officers if somebody made us do that. I mean, that's kind of scary to say that. Okay, kind of makes me a little bit nervous. That said, these are positions that I don't just jump into them. I think about them. I study them. I'm moving forward. I didn't get a lot of attention for them, but I'm okay with that. I am now.
All right, so you're elected. You're Mayor Williams. You're over here. Who are the people you're surrounding yourself with? Who are your advisors? Who are, if you want to name names, that's great. Please do.
Well, I'm just here. I'm gonna have to listen to this. I'll back there. So I'm gonna do what.
I mean, you don't switch. I mean, we always
No, I
ask
know.
the question. Like, just get. I want to get a sense of the sort of the minds that would be shaping a Williams administration.
So I used to have a collage of people around me, and in my campaign, I won't do that. I'll be taking shots maybe. But I have in my
Take shots.
no, we're not gonna do it. She's gonna print all of it, and it'll be like, he got flustered face, get a little ticklish, bristly, he's always took a shot at it. Body blow, body. So
You're a fan.
I am. I read every word she says, and I hang on it. I promise.
Do you want to do this interview
No,
between
no,
us?
no. So I have historically, I can't say by design, but by coincidence, had a lot of young people around me. And I use experience too, so I blend in. But a lot of young people, because energy is necessary to keep up with a effective schedule. I have a collage of ethnic groups, so Latinos, Asians, Jews, African Americans have worked for me. Some people from the reentry community with past history have worked for me. Serious crimes have worked for me. People from the LGBT community have worked for me. And in my campaign, it's the same kind of deal. So my expectation is that we find, but by the way, they were not chosen as such. They're good people. They're smart people. They were driven people. And I expect the same thing to happen in the administration. Now, I will say this. There are certain categories of space that experience has to be. And so I would, as hopefully a thoughtful person, ask people who sacrifice some time, who have the benefit of time and experience in commerce and in education, to take senior roles in terms of policy directives to help us with regard to that. And then we're going to train this next generation to take over. They're going to sit in those deputy positions. They're going to take on responsibilities, and they're going to be a broad array of Philadelphians that can participate.
Are there past or current figures in the city administration or at the state level that you can point to as having done good work? I'm not suggesting that you hire them directly, hire those specific individuals, but just get a sense of the sort of,
So the most obvious one that everybody will say is I can't afford him, so David Alcone. 7 days a week he works 8, 24 hours a day he works 25. So he's relentless. If I could find like 3 of him, I would do that. You do have some hidden gems in the administration. I don't want to call them back because that puts pressure upon them. But there are some people working tirelessly. There are people in L&I, for instance, who have a vision for L&I that differs from the public, and that is a seamless L&I that works across different departments, that uses technology, that trains those who are there. They just need financial support and the ability to do that. There is a personality or two I'm thinking about being a managing director, a strong managing director, as opposed to interacting that way. And we have, and I'll leave it there because I don't want to cause people.
Okay. So you knew we were going to have to talk about this. Let's talk about the Susquehanna guys.
Who are that? What? Oh, those guys.
There's really no coordination.
No. Please.
Stop that. All right. So these are the traders with the firm about Kenwood who. No, they're okay with traders. They don't like investors.
Oh, okay.
Who have grown very wealthy, who have supported a number of philanthropic causes, many of them related around education. Have also been very politically active and have supported your gubernatorial campaign in a big way. They're supporting your mayoral campaign through a super PAC in a significant way. Dave Davies had a story today that says they're on track to spend $4 million in this campaign. Is that news to you? That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so to be fair, to me, not that really matters, but to be fair to me, I truly don't have, like, one of them is like my buddy, my friend. I had not talked to him in 7 or 8 months, whatever. We've not talked for a while. So I literally didn't know what their plans were, how they were going to do it. I knew they were interested in supporting the campaign, or supporting the process of the campaign. That much I didn't know. But beyond that, I can't tell you. I didn't know. I don't know. Like,
And isn't that weird that you've got a group of folks who are dumping $4 million into a race, and they're gonna control your image to a degree. Isn't that at least a little awkward?
I'm glad you said to a degree. And you know why you said to a degree, right?
Huh.
Because I'm the only one who paid for my ads. Nobody writes about that very much, but I'm the matter of fact, I was hilarious.
There's a lot of ads that you haven't paid for.
So let me finish. There were ads. You're right, but that's not the point. The point is this: not you guys, because you're fair. I remember when Jim Kenny's ads went up supporting Jim Kenny, right? Paid by Super PAC. Right? In that same article, I had run my own ad that was paid for by me. That Jim Kenny's and these guys we nobody that you can't but the reality is more people than me when it comes to that. And so the reality is that there are paid for him. These guys they had this conspiratorial thought of like controlling all the talk about they believe in grew up from my never thought that it was very probably a few issues when they go hard they lose their commitment and emotional from one of my friends' perspective. I was to a view that they children have those that are not. Children are not that's all.
A group of three white suburban dudes from the suburbs are basically buying this election.
The same way I guess you'd be telling them that one white dude who works in the building trades in South Philadelphia that you don't ever mention. What's his name? Yeah. Who you want to I didn't think you want to say his name, but for some reason that's like a mystery. He's in real dark money. He gets an advantage position. He operates and influences. He calls newspapers on a daily basis. He gets up to rent a lot of public people who are in office.
Who are we talking about here?
You tell me.
No, I'm not asking
well,
you.
I'm going to create the mystery, man. You'll figure it out. You guys will figure it out later on. He has more operatives paid for in this election cycle than I've ever seen in the history of Philadelphia, including Ed Adele. Okay? Anybody. And people are going to talk about three guys from City Line Avenue who don't have any advantage position in this conversation. I think there's a missing moment that is a big pregnant pause that people should face the reality that, for whatever reason, they're refusing to completely write the whole story. So if they're going to be concerned about those guys, then they should be concerned about that one guy. Because that one guy has advantage. City Hall, City Council, Supreme Court. All three. And has an impact upon the Comcast Center in terms of how it was done. They're still rewiring the plumbing in place. So we don't talk in these truths. We sort of do vagaries. I'm not sure why. That's what holds Philadelphia back. We're very parochial. We're very shrouded. We play little games back. But I don't do that. That's why I get.
Well, let's be very explicit here. So if you were elected mayor, and it sounds like you're concerned about some of the extensive influence that John Dockery has in this town, is there something you would try to do? Is there something you would try to do bring
You
that?
started it now.
Oh, yeah. The Comcast bit.
Yeah, but
Plumbing.
the plumbing.
More electrician, actually.
Yeah, it is. Now, what were we saying?
Great, thanks. I was asking, what if you were elected, is there something you would do to try to curb the political influence of the building trades, or to diversify the building trades?
Yeah, I'm a diversified. Yes, I talked about that publicly. No, I mean, look, he has a right to do what he's doing, so I'm not complaining about that.
Okay.
My point is, so do they. My point is, there's no balance in terms of the conversation. It's like these guys are still sitting on the avenue, go home, don't really want to get the newspapers there because they help me out in my campaign. And have, frankly, as you well know, most African Americans don't have this opportunity to sit on the stage. Everdell was the biggest fundraiser in the history of Pennsylvania, other than me. I raised more money than Everdell did. How I did it, everybody made an issue with. But nobody ever sort of stopped to say that, I saw Everdell drop $100,000 check when he ran for governor in his account. I saw him run up $12 million in his process. Nobody ever talked about how those people were influencing the government. They talk about me. So if you're going to talk about me, then talk about me fairly and completely, and have a well-researched conversation about who influences who for why. That's all I ask.
Yeah, and I get that. It's just that you're the one on the stage right now.
That's all I can tell you.
All right. Let's see here.
We are, but you did ask us here about the first country. I think that admittedly, many of them are evolving. Yes, they're evolving. For obvious reasons, they don't have enough people to do the work. And so, in the past, when you would pass it down to your son or your daughter, primarily your son, that tradition no longer applies because a lot of them are going to college and don't want to do the work.
You're talking about the building, right?
Yeah, exactly. So admittedly, they are beginning to change. We have to expedite that. And you expedite that through the public process and the private process. If Penn and Drexel are going to build, then they should be, I hear a lot about these PLA agreements. And those PLA agreements, project labor agreements, should have a component that will allow them to say diversity is an element of it, and especially in the private setting, they can hit a targeted number. I would expect that if we're going to support through zoning, through permitting, all those things that we can influence, then that's going to be part of the conversation.
Okay. How much time we got left?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. All right, great.
What time is it?
Wait.
We're going to go to audience questions. I got another plan. We're going to go to audience questions.
So much for the economy and jobs. And
No, they're in here. All right. Name one big idea from another major city that you'd like to sort of steal and bring to Philadelphia.
One you already wrote about, so it's not really from the city. North Dakota, right?
That's fair.
So the municipal bank idea I've talked about of late a lot. And so for those who don't understand, I have suggested that Philadelphia create its own municipal bank. Now understand something. Lynn's reaction was classic. Like, okay, we can't get LNI straight. How are we going to have a municipal bank? Municipal banks are not places that have ATM machines, hold deposits. What they are is take the millions of dollars that we currently see in the Wall Street to manage. Take that the loan portfolio will be for small business only. We want to drive money and capitalization to corridors across Philadelphia. And the reason for that is because you have across Philadelphia, Wadsworth Avenue, 52nd standing and pay their bills, but because they don't have access to capital. Big business, big loans. Small businesses, no loans. And so our plan is to capitalize. And the one thing that I think is most relevant about this idea that I really do like is that neighborhoods hire people from neighborhoods. And so that means that somebody who is entering society has a shot at getting a job. Somebody who is a high school dropout or a high school graduate gets a shot at a job or become an entrepreneur. The other part is to drive money to women. The biggest population of folks with small businesses are women. And by the way, they pay their loans. And because the other great part about this is we cut out the middleman. So for those who don't follow this, when we send that money to Wall Street, there's a middle person in between to get all these fees. We're moving that out of the way. So the return on investment is doubled down. So we get a return on investment. We generate money to our bottom line. We recharge our corridors across Philadelphia. And we hire a population of people who want to go to work. And so it is the classic moment where people say, well, what do you do about people with inclusion, people of color? It deals with that. What do you do about women? It does that. How do you generate capital in neighborhoods without, giving grants so we make that may never return? We do that. And how we generate money to our general fund? We do all of that. And so this is a practical idea that, by the way, started in Philadelphia initially, and for some reason we deserved it.
How is this different than some of the other programs that are out there, like PIBC as a small business lending program?
That's a great point. So PIBC really is defined not really a small business program. It's a smaller big business program. This is a category of space that nobody has paid attention to. I don't say that in a negative way. It's just nobody's paid attention to it, and consequently, you see the development happen here rather than in those neighborhoods. So that entity, PIBC, is intended for another kind of category of space. This is the cousin or the brother or little brother to PIBC. It's the complement with the same standards, federal regulation. You have to have a credit history. You have to pay back your loans, all those things. So it's not a grant program or giveaway program. This is a business program, but it's designed for small business.
What specific actions would you take to grow the local economy?
So
Specific.
Yeah. So the municipal bank was one,
Right.
Right. And the other part is the tax policy as it relates techie, for instance, in Philadelphia. So technology in Philadelphia has taken off. Another one of those things that cuts across categories and people. So you can be in high schools, create an app, or you can college, create an app. So we have a technology community who fundamentally wants access to capital, which we will give them to the small bank, and also relief in terms of taxes. So the tax structure in Philadelphia will change.
Are the school district's budget problems the result of the SRC's failure to manage efficiencies and to kind of run the district well, or is it a result of the fact that a third of Philadelphia students attend charter schools and we no longer have a charter reimbursement?
Neither one. The SRC arrived because we were broke. The SRC came here because we were broke. And we were so broke, we had to borrow the state's money. Charter schools didn't create the financial collapse of the district. That's not even close to accurate. And the truth
is it fair to say they exacerbated? Not that the charter schools have, but the states taking away the charter reimbursement line.
That doesn't
has
help.
that exacerbated the
Well,
problem?
so certainly you can say if they return, and I'm supportive of it, and the government's supportive of it, return the charter school reimbursement line, the pressure for publics would not be as great in demand. But let's be real. Before charters existed, 100,000 kids left Philadelphia. Did that exacerbate the financial problem in Philadelphia? Of course it did. Did we start figuring out what we do with our capital plan? No, we didn't. We went ahead and built more schools that didn't have enough children. Okay? And we had a complement of a staff that was out of kilter and not designed around what was in front of our faces. And so if we lost those 100,000 kids before the charters existed, by the way, we lost them to people who had money, who had the ability to move, who had a middle class income and moved away. I don't understand why a class of student who is in a charter school is any different than the class of student who has the economic freedom to move. They all have impacted the district. All everyone who leaves on any given day, whether they drop out, go to a charter school, or their parents have the money to move, have an impact upon the bottom line of public schools. So
is the district's financial crisis, which, as you note accurately, as it's not exactly brand new, is that a product then of quality issues and management issues, or a shortage of state and local funding?
I would say it's a combination. We've suffered through, other than Edendale, who I think really was a pioneer in that regard. We have suffered through, and even Bob Casey, when he raised taxes, it wasn't at the level that was sufficient to sort of backfill with that which had been lost. Certainly, we as a state are underfunding our schools, and it's noted nationally what our ratio is. Not just recently, but historically has always been that. So certainly that's a factor. But not enough parents believe in our school system to stay in Philadelphia. Now, was that part of the demographics of different ethnic groups moving around or the quality of school? I couldn't tell you that. All I can tell you is that people moved. And then when they moved, there was been a staggering consequence of that consistent drumbeat to leave public schools as we know them in Philadelphia for a while.
The city's murder rate has obviously gotten better in recent years. It's lower, but it's far higher.
Murder rate gets better. How's that work?
It's lower.
Yeah, okay.
It's still far higher than a lot of other big cities. What's your target for a homicide rate? And 0 is everybody's ideal target, but is there a specific goal you have in mind, and how would you reach it?
So the goal is that people in North Philadelphia and West Philadelphia, those places that have homicide rates that are higher than the average across the city, feel comfortable. And that people will feel comfortable to move into those communities as the homicide rate and crime rate is controlled. I started, I don't know, 10 years ago, an anti-gun task force. And I think at its height, it was about $5 million up into police officers, not the feds, police officers who get undercover work in Philadelphia to get those illegal guns off the street. It's had an impact. As mayor, we're going to fund that. And we're going to draw down money from the Commonwealth, but we're going to fund it. Because police officers will tell you they feel much more comfortable doing their job. They don't think that some person who shouldn't have a firearm has access to them. And so we're going to fund it, and we're going to drive data, as they already do, in those areas to make people feel comfortable. And you can make people feel comfortable. You can. What's about a mile and a half from my home. It has moved up from where it started to about 52nd Street, West Philadelphia. They've done it through great policing. And it's not just all ours. Their policing tactics have worked. They provided cameras and a variety of other things and tools and interacting with the community in a different way that make people in those communities feel safe. I think that's the tone, that's the statistic.
But there's not a specific number that you're looking for?
No, I look for a comfort level. I don't look for, I can't tell you it's 5. Let me tell you something. You cut it to one person, right? And the person, their head's chopped off and their body's burned and they're dumped in the middle of the street. That's going to shock you a little bit and not want you to be there. 10 people get grazed by a bullet, and of course, and nobody reports about it. They don't necessarily know it. So it's about what people feel comfortable.
Okay. You said you wanted to fix the pension, or you said you would fix the pension problem. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big problem that's eluded a lot of fixes from a lot of mayors. How would you do that specifically?
There's 2 parts to it. One, the assets which we actually have that we talk about, PGW, you have the airport, you have the water department, you have land. My mortgage has been sold 4 times since I've owned the mortgage. We have debt, grade A debt. We should be bundling it and monitoring it and filling in that hole that will relieve the pressure of it. The other part is a growth strategy. I mean, Philadelphia has a history when it comes to economics of saying we're going to cut a program and raise taxes. They don't face the fact that we have to grow an economy that will relieve the pressure in real terms, not only on the pension, but on all of our assets across the board, all of those departments that need to spend money. Our school system, all this stuff needs money, but it's not going to come simply because we raise taxes or we cut a program. It's going to become because we have a plan. Small business, technology, energy health, all those areas to invest in to grow the population of people who work.
On the capitalization side, in terms of selling assets, I mean, that's obviously proven pretty challenging. It didn't work out that well for PGW. How would you do it? How would you sell or lease those assets and kind of get around the legitimate political objections that exist to doing so?
I'm not obviously there, but I don't know if there were objections as much as there were questions about PGW that council members wanted to have answered. And when they felt that they weren't a part of the process, they took a position. Things like well, who holds on to the asset? Is it going to be sold or is it going to be privatized? Is it going to be, authority or public-private partnership? All those things I think they were open to in terms of being creative, provided that they found that seniors who were in poverty, that their discount would be removed, that a private entity arriving wouldn't kick everybody out who has a contract which is signed through a small union down there. All those things I think were open to being worked out, and I think everybody is still open to those things working out. So I don't think it is something that's fait accompli and we can't get done.
All right, last question here. What issue that you think is really vital to the city's success in the future isn't getting enough attention in this race and that we haven't already talked about tonight?
I can't write a list.
Pick your top 2.
That's not fair to you or to say that. I think that education obviously is on everybody's mind. The economy and the jobs everybody's mind. Public safety is everybody's mind. I think that you're doing your best to cover it and gets a lot of attention drawn to it. There are always all these other subcategories, the arts, clean streets. One of my initiatives is talking about the fact that Baltimore in front of us is cleaning streets every week. We're going to clean streets in Philadelphia, so this issue of Philadelphia being a dirty place. We're going to reconstitute the street department. A small fee of $5 on your vehicle will allow us to, registration of your vehicle will allow us to reconstitute the department, clean streets on an annual basis, about $3 million, and regroup the vehicles. So those are things that we don't always get to talk about. And there's a litany of others that kind of mawkish in nature, but we'll get to it.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Senator, for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it.